To our June 2nd. It's almost halfway through this year already, APCHA meeting. We will open it up, and Cindy or staff, can you read the roll?
Skippy?
Present.
Rachel?
Here.
Kelly?
Yes, I'm here.
David?
Yes, here.
Carson?
I'm here.
Francie? Is not here. Rick? Head? He might be joining later. I know John Ward is not going to be here, so we are all set. Okay?
Correct. And if I see a Rick or Francie, I will make a note for the record.
Thank you.
So we're going to start today's meeting with public comment. 3
Can
minutes
I,
for
Skippy, can
anyone
I,
in the public to speak.
Skippy, can I first ask
Oh,
if
you
the
want to do that now? Yeah.
Can I just request that we move board comments before executive session? Because then GrassRoots can close down and they don't have to stick around. If the board's okay with that, I'd like to move the board comments before executive session.
Does anyone have any issue with that? Seeing none, we can do that.
And I noticed
Rick
Rick
is
just
here now.
joined.
Yep, Rick.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, we will do that. Okay, now we will move to public comment. So 3 minutes for anyone, any member of the public to speak to something not on our agenda today. We do not have a sign-up list, so just feel free to unmute yourself, state your first and last name, and we would love to hear from you. there is a little bit of a delay often on broadcast. So I'll just ask one more time, is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on anything not on our agenda today? Okay. Seeing none, we will close that section of our meeting and move to executive director comments or staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I share my, you know what, I don't need to share my screen. I've got a quick update for you. One is that we've, as you know, we're continuing to search for a new executive director. The interview panel met last week, and we've selected 6 folks to interview. Some of them have housing agency experience, and we feel good about the folks that we'll be talking to. So that interview panel, as you will remember, includes Cindy.christensen, Bethany Spitz, Rich Engelhardt and Phyllis Matthijs from the county, and Courtney DeVito, Aspen's HR director, and myself. So we had a good meeting last week and looking forward to next week. The only other heads up is that about an hour ago, Cindy, Bethany, Andrew Miller, and I got out of, met with a company. We committed last year both to the APCHA board as well as to the BOCC and the city council that we would look for ways to reduce the licensing costs of HomeTrek. If you'll remember, the Salesforce licenses are the bulk of our ongoing fees, and they're quite high at $125,000 a year. And we met with a company who has a proposed potential way for us to lower those costs by developing a front end essentially to the system. So I'll be coming to you more with that, but it's just to let you know that we are all at the staff level conscious of that commitment we made, and we're making good on it. And that's all I've got for today. Thank you.
Any board members have questions on either of those things for Diane? Kelly, I think I see you.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess when do you expect to interview the 6 applicants you've identified? Like what time?
We've got interviews scheduled next Monday and Tuesday, first round, and then final round are scheduled with John Peacock and Sarah Ott for the end of the month.
Anybody else? Follow-up question for you, Diane. We were going to do these interviews several weeks back when I was out of town, and there was an opportunity for us to watch those. Is that still going to be the case?
That will be. What we need to do is, I think we've got a tentative, I think I put a target tentative on the calendar somewhere. I will send you that right after next week. What we want to do is make sure we've got folks to bring forward. And If we don't, we'll keep looking.
Okay, and then just so I'm clear, we went back out to look for additional candidates after the first sweep. That's accurate, right? And so of these 6, are all 6 new, or are some from that initial sweep?
We do have one from the initial interview process.
Got it. Okay, so it's a 5 plus 1. Beautiful. Rick. Rick, you are on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Skippy. This is probably not an appropriate time to ask, but maybe this should be directed at Jim True. But what's going on with that trademark infringement lawsuit that we're facing? Is there any movement on that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, Jim.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I just got off the phone with an attorney for HomeTrek, and I believe we may have worked something out. I'll receive something from her in the next couple of days. But there is a solution out there, and we're exploring it.
Jim, just to clarify, I'm guessing you were on the phone with the Track Bicycles attorney?
Yes, the attorney for the opponent to our trademark contacted Bethany, and Bethany asked that I contact the attorney, which I did. And like I said, as a matter of fact, I talked to her about 20 minutes ago. And I think we have a resolution that will allow us to continue with use of the mark.
Tell them that we were not referencing Lance's home in the West End, not the intention.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. But
Anything else, sir?
I'm encouraged.
Yeah.
That's my update.
Thank you. Rick, did you have anything else?
No, that's it, thanks.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Diane. So we'll move on to our consent calendar, which is minutes of May 19th and 25th. And I take any requests for amendment or a motion to approve.
I would move to approve. I wasn't in attendance on that first meeting, but I read through the minutes. They look appropriate, and I move to approve those both minutes.
A second.
Okay, we have a first from Rick and a second from Kelly. Staff, would you please read the roll?
Skippy,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and Carson.
Yes.
Carson.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Gorgeous. Awesome. Thank you very much. Moving right on through. So this is going to be the meat of our agenda today. This is the first reading of regulation changes that the APCHA board and staff have pulled out as things that we can change to make improvements in relatively short order. More to come. And then we'll move into standards for sellers. What we're going to be looking to do, and really for the public here, is just confirm what we agreed to in the last meeting in terms of these regulation changes, and then look for any requests for alterations within those individual areas or needs for more information to bring those forth at second reading so that hopefully we can pass them expeditiously. And I will invite staff to come present these changes.
Okay. I'm sorry if I echo. I'm in the Redbird conference room, and it's quite large. So what we're going to do today is go through the first reading of the APCHA regulations. As Skippy said, just confirm. So I'm going to have, Maddie's already doing it, sharing her screen, and she will walk us through page by page as to where we are. So the first change that we talked about last time is transfers outside the bid process. We are tightening up and providing some clarifying language so that if a individual is being added to the deed, so for example, if one parent is staying on and they're adding a child or a spouse, they don't have to meet the income and asset requirements, but if the original owner is being removed and a new owner is being added, for example, if a parent is removing themselves and leaving it only to the child, that child's income and assets must be below category 5, and the qualified child must meet the minimum occupancy -1. And so those are the big changes there. Any questions on that?
Yeah, where do I find myself here?
Okay, Kelly, I saw your hand up first, so.
Hey, sorry, I'm toggling between my screen. I guess I'm looking at the red line version, and when I read first I started reading the clean copy, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to go look at the red line to make more sense of this. And I'm noticing that in the clean version, it says that they would have a work history under the first one where the owner remains on the deed, that there would be a required work history for a sibling of 4 years. And I thought it said 10 years in the non-red line version. So I want to
No, I apologize, Kelly. I thought I caught all of those. So this got pulled from the overarching document where all of the proposed changes were in, so I missed it. It will be 4 years, and it's up to the board at a later meeting and discussion to talk about whether there's an extension of work history to that 10-year mark. So certainly coming, but I will make sure it's all consistent at 4 years for the next meeting.
Okay. And then on that same bullet, I'm a little confused. It says the addition of a sibling is permitted. However, the sibling must qualify fully under that specific category. A qualified sibling does not have to meet the income and asset requirements for a unit. So that seems contradictory.
You're right. It does seem a little contradictory. The overarching goal is that individual must, Kelly, I profusely apologize. Something happened in this red line version that wasn't there. The sibling does need to meet that income and asset level, so that will get cleared up for next time. My apologies.
That's okay. That's why first readings are so useful.
Yeah.
And then regarding where on the second transfer where the owner is being removed, I would just suggest maybe instead of it saying removing owner from deed, adding new owner, maybe something like replacing with new owner. Because the adding is like, well, are they all on there or is someone coming off? Just a language suggestion. And then help me understand, I don't remember our conversation related to keeping the income and assets below category 5.
So originally, staff had recommended that the qualifying child meet that category for income and assets, and the board had pushed back and requested, at least my understanding was the board had requested that that qualifying child be at least below a category 5 income and assets. And so that's where we've landed. And I think if any other, Skippy, if you want to step in and add clarifying language.
I do, because I wanted to clarify as well, not below category 5, but at or below. So my recommendation is the word at is in there. And Kelly, where that came from was just, I think the intention here is continuity of community, but only insofar as that they are actually living here and a worker. And so, if somebody owned the home and was a category 3, they pass away or for some other reason want to provide that for their son or daughter, but they're $5 below that and they're in category 2 and now they have no home, like that just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And so, yes, there may be some category movement in there, but just making sure that they are meeting those requirements in terms of being a full-time worker and not having so much money in the bank as to be able to afford something in the free market or RO should probably get us to the intent. And so the recommendation would be at or below, not below, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I wonder if the unit is an RO, does this not apply?
It's a good question for staff, and I have a few in here, of which that is one of them. So,
some of our units, Kelly, that are RO don't need to meet occupancy, just based upon the original deed restriction, and so that's probably the primary. What would happen is they don't have to meet occupancy as is, and so they get to choose the purchaser. So. Rachel, I see your hand up next.
Yeah, thank you, Bethany. And I'm a little in the same boat, toggling back and forth between seeing you all and looking at the packet. And so I'm bringing this from, the kind of description of the recommended changes right now. And I just wanted to discuss it, but owners are permitted to allow a significant other to move in, but not own, with them who might not otherwise qualify due to employment.
Rachel, we're going to get there. Can I jump to that spot in a minute?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought that was part of this. But then let me go ahead and ask about the -1, I guess. And we've all heard it before, and it really just kind of had struck me recently that, you know, I think that's allowing that you might have a child in the future or something, the new owner who's been transferred to, or that maybe they wouldn't qualify for their parents' home because they don't. I don't know why we would allow that instead of saying, yes, you can take the place, but it has to be occupancy and you can get a roommate to do that. I just don't know why we're allowing empty bedrooms to go forward in this process.
Rachel, I like your comment, and I would support it.
And I think what staff was proposing is I don't want to say a middle ground, but a step towards that. Right now, a single individual, one person, is allowed to take over a parent's 4-bedroom house, for example, and they may or may not put roommates in it. And so the idea behind meeting occupancy -1 would at least get that individual is qualifying with a significant other or children, and that is the unit's going to be more utilized. It's hard for us to require a renter in there from an ownership perspective. We wouldn't have much footing.
Well, we would if we would not allow the transfer to a unit that didn't meet maximum occupancy. And right now, APCHA is fairly generous in saying, oh, you can transfer this unit as long as one person out of that 4-bedroom is working in the community.
How are you?
And so...
Phyllis, you're not muted.
You're unmuted.
Oh, damn. How does that happen to me all the time? I am so sorry.
We're just so interested in hearing what's going on in your world. It's cool.
I mean, if we're looking at this as middle ground, when would the next move up be to say, no, you have to have maximum occupancy if you'd like to inherit the place? And
to be honest, I think, and I don't want to speak for all staff, but I believe that our discussions, and I'm going back probably 6-9 months now, but were that the child met occupancy, and so that there was no wiggle room. They had to come with if it was a 4-bedroom, they had to come with a qualification packet that had either children and a spouse or some combination that would be on that deed and would be living in that unit. And so we took a step back and just said they had to meet -1. But to be honest, I think staff would be fully supportive of actually going that child had to meet occupancy based upon that qualification packet.
Well, you know, the problem with making rules that are broad when we're talking about everything from 2 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms makes it awkward because, you know, it could be a 2-bedroom and one person just enjoying a 2-bedroom for a very, very long time. And at the very least, if it's a single person inheriting a 2-bedroom, they should be required to have that occupancy if they'd like to go forward with the inheritance until they meet a significant other or they bid for a 1-bedroom, you know, or, you know, we keep talking about the move up and move down mobility to readdress occupancy. And this seems like it might, you know, go against that. And so that's all I was really kind of wondering it seems the 4-bedroom is the outlier place, and we have fewer 4-bedrooms than almost anything else. And, you know, maybe it should be a little more specific to the size of unit that we're even talking about.
Rachel, I think it's a really good suggestion. And just speaking for myself and working to get clarity for staff, you know, I think I was basically in a position of being willing to accept a pre-compromise, and I really appreciate you presenting the opportunity for me to question my assumptions. And I've certainly said, and I know many, if not all, of this board has said, we need to maximize the use of our existing stock. And so for that reason, I would be very supportive of your recommended change. And I want to turn the question back to the board and say, is there anyone who disagrees, who thinks that we should keep the -1 in? And if so, make that case to us, but let's come to a consensus for staff for second reading.
Kelly's got her hand up. I don't know if it's about this or not, but.
It is. I guess I'm just wondering, so when owners do their requalification packet, and they were bought in a 2-bedroom and had a qualification for a 2-bedroom, but then at their requalification only have one person living in there, what does APCHA do?
So I think you're talking about the affidavit and not a qualification packet, just because our owners don't have to requalify once they own. If there's a change in the household, APCHA doesn't do anything. So if I think in the regulations right now, you're not allowed to remove the name of an owner for 4 years after purchase unless under court order. That basically covers a divorce or any sort of separation. So essentially, at point of qualification or at affidavit time, we see lots of changes either with folks being removed due to life circumstances. And once you're in, occupancy does not matter.
Sure. So I'm trying to think, and that's what I thought was the case. But I just wanted to be clear here, because we're not forcing people who are living in a 2-bedroom or a single person in a 2-bedroom to house that bedroom now. So the determination for me is, do we use the transfer of ownership as the leveraging opportunity here? Because otherwise we're not thinking of it consistently throughout the program.
Yeah, I'm open to other discussion on this. I just really kind of wanted to make sure it was thoroughly discussed. But it seems that the benefit to the first owner is that you are fully qualified for occupancy and income in every unit. And then upon transfer, we would be saying, well, income is required, but not occupancy, and that benefit that the first homeowner got satisfies it now, in chain of ownership could be for perpetuity, if, to the next person, to saying, no, you don't really have to have that bedroom filled. And so again, I think it may be more important to have this discussion with the 3 and 4 bedrooms, or 2 bedrooms, but an awful lot of people would love to have a 2-bedroom to themselves, given that many of our 2 bedrooms are barely 700 square feet. And so, I just am wondering whether that benefit the first owner had, that, hey, your kid has grown up and they've moved out now, you can have a roommate if you want to, but you don't have to. Should that be extended with the transfers of title? And I kind of doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a quick question. I'm a little bit confused. I'm all for maximizing the use of whatever size unit that we're talking about. If for instance, if I died and my son was given, was willed this unit that I'm in, it's a 3-bedroom. Being a single person, he could actually, under this scenario, not inherit this unit if he's a single person.
He would have to
be married and have 1 child.
No, you'd have to have 2 roommates.
Or roommates.
Great, yeah. So how do we mandate somebody that's got an ownership unit that they've got to have rental or rent those extra rooms out? I mean, is that allowed? I mean, is that legal or binding?
Rick, I don't think so. I think Tom's on the line. I'm kind of limited on my screen as well. I don't believe that we can require an owner to put a renter in that unit in order to receive the transfer, but I could be wrong, and Tom could feel otherwise.
I'm happy to comment.
Please.
If you'd like.
That's what you're here for.
I don't know if my video is working here, as long as you can hear me.
We see it.
It's no different than the minimum occupancy requirement itself.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Someone wants to bid on a unit and there's a minimum occupancy requirement. You're basically telling them they gotta fill the unit if they wanna own it. And it doesn't matter if you're, to me anyway, if you're specifying one way of doing it or multiple ways of doing it. But there is no reason legally to say that it's more correct to leave bedrooms unoccupied than it is to require somebody to figure out how they're going to meet the occupancy requirement. I don't have any problem with it at all, frankly.
I do want to jump in and just say Cindy just texted and asked if she could say one thing. So Skippy, if you don't mind, if Cindy can.
Just to let you know, it's a different situation when you're going to buy. You have to meet the minimum occupancy. You can't say, well, I'll get a renter. So when you're talking about getting a renter, you're talking about something different than what we require when somebody's first bidding on a unit. But because somebody can say, well, I'm going to have a renter in there, and then they say this person's going to rent it out, and then the person rents it and provides their paperwork, and then within a month they kick the person out and they don't have a renter in it. It's a lot harder to really make sure that somebody has a renter in there. But again, I don't want anybody to get confused, because if to bid, you have to meet the occupancy with your household, and it can't be a renter. A 3-bedroom has to be a household. The top priority is a household of 3 with one of those a dependent, and a 4-bedroom is a household of 4 with at least 2 dependents. So it is different than if somebody says, well, I'll bring a renter in for one of those bedrooms. That's at the initial purchase of a unit.
You know, and I know, and we're all trying to sort through this. I really appreciate those clarifications, Cindy, but that again kind of raises a thicket when you get to a transfer, because you're now saying you're going to transfer a 3-bedroom to a single occupant because their parent qualified 20 years ago. And under this transfer provision, we're saying, well, occupancy doesn't matter anymore as long as one person. And I guess it's the occupancy minus 1, so it'd be 2 people. He would only have to have 2 people in the 3-bedroom. But it would still not necessarily be a household or related or siblings or anything. And so that part of the rule already goes out the window when it's a transfer.
And currently, you can transfer to a child that does not meet the occupancy right now. And so the idea is that that child household has to be a household minus 1. So in the 3-bedroom example, it would be the household had maybe 2 people instead of usually the required 3 for the 3-bedroom. So now again, if we want to transfer to occupancy has to be met from the household perspective, that's easy for staff to do.
Yeah, well, I guess not to keep beating up Rick's example because it could happen to anyone, but wouldn't we be saying that unless Rick's son married somebody, he's not going to qualify? He can't just have his best friend move in with him to be 2 people and make it. It's got to be a household. That gets really confusing. And then just add one more layer to the trying to simplify, but also adding some confusion. There's an entirely different, if the owner dies and that dependent or that child is not in residency, it doesn't automatically go to them. The regulations as they're written right now say that that dependent has to be, or that individual needs to be in residency. They might not qualify. They have 6 months to either get a job or sell other property if they were to own something else, but they have to, they just have 6 months, but they have to be living in the unit at point of death. Yeah.
Tom's hand's up and Rick's hand's up. I think Rick's was up first.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I forgot to lower it.
So Tom.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. It may be harsh to people who own units and kind of situation that Rick is talking about, but there isn't any legal reason why with deed restricted properties you have to honor the inheritance at all. okay? You don't have to honor it at all from a legal standpoint. So whatever you do to, you know, mitigate what you might consider to be an overly harsh impact in that regard, it's fine. The conditions you put on it, you have discretion to do that. You could that's because you could go so far as to say, and it's in the, as it's actually written in the deed restriction, if you inherit a unit and you don't fully qualify under the guidelines, you have to sell it. If you want to do something more, you know, less harsh to someone who inherits, that's fine, but imposing minimum occupancy requirements, whether they do it through a household or some other way, you have the discretion to do that.
You know, and I raise this because, again, we constantly hear about maximum utilization to the extent possible of the units and not deliberately having vacant unit bedrooms for longer period of time. I understand that there's a competing goal, and it's an equally important goal, which APCHA has recognized, and that is the continuity of community and of children perhaps not having to battle it out again in a lottery, not, you know, the chance to be in their family home where they grew up. And I think those are valuable and worthwhile goals, but I really just have a hard time with the idea that some units, second bedroom could sit empty for 20 years. And that could easily happen in a lot of places. You know, I went for a period of time without a roommate, you know, and I'm an owner, you know, I wasn't trying to transfer it to anyone, but then I went back to having roommates. You know, what I'm wondering is there more work and maybe greater brain power that could look at this, that could say that if someone is not able to inherit their unit because they don't have occupancy, but they're agreeing to sell it, putting it on the market for others, that they would get a priority on the first two-bedroom or unit that comes up that would be of the size that they need at that point in their lives. I mean, I just don't know, quote, how to fully balance those two contradictory goals. And, you know, maybe staff went around the circle on it long enough to come back to the -1, and maybe that's where we need to come back to. But on the other hand, it's really hard to gauge how often the transfer provision will be used and how they will, how people fully understand these various set of layers of conditions. And, you know, that's a little, getting back to where I've said, I'd love to see some narrative form of the guidelines at some point, you know, that start to either be examples or to say this is how this plays out over time. Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the side of basically what Rachel just said. I think continuity of community, keeping families together, being able to pass your home on to your children if they want it, and keeping that family in this community and part of the community should be the overarching goal, in my mind. Not to boot people out just because somebody that's grown up in this town, grown up in that house, but they don't meet some, what I consider fairly draconian regulations here, that they're out on the street. There's got to be something that's more in the middle here, that doesn't put people in jeopardy of losing their home just because their parent died and they can't find somebody immediately to fill a bedroom.
And it's a great point, David, and I think that's a different regulation that we're going to have to look at, and we can certainly add that to a future list of what happens when an owner passes away and the transfer policy associated with that. We can certainly add this, and by no means is this an attempt to force families out. Folks are allowed to stay in their unit as one person, even if it's a 4-bedroom, as long as they would like. So Rick and Tom, I see your hands up, and Skippy, I just saw your hand go up, so I don't know.
I just want to say I completely agree with Rachel on this, and I'm all for maximizing usage of these units. And I think that's a great suggestion, Rachel, that we give the person that inherits a unit that they can't otherwise qualify for an opportunity to stay in the area and get back in and have at least a shot at something that's more appropriate to their size, so size appropriate. And I hate to hold up this whole regulations thing because this, I think, needs some further discussion and to kick this around and come up with some other ideas. But I completely agree with Rachel's point of view there.
Just to ask, is there a willingness from the board to at least move forward with something and then come back and continue the discussion? I'm just trying to figure out if we'd like to go forward with either -1 or occupancy met and then continue the discussion, or if, and Skippy, maybe you can help me with this, or if we just want to scrap it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I definitely don't want to scrap it, right? I mean, there's always, as we all know, we've all experienced, there's always the opportunity to tie it into something else, grander, bigger, more symbiotic. And I think those are great things to do, but if we keep putting things off entirely until we get there, we're just going to continue to get nowhere. So I think that we should absolutely move something forward and pass it. And if there's a second piece that's related to it, let's put that on staff's radar. We can work to get that into the long-range plan and make sure that it comes back. So from a process standpoint, that would be my recommendation is let's be the board that gets some stuff passed and then comes back and continues to iterate and improve as we go. Trying to wrap up what we've been talking about here. I think this is why staff had the sort of pre-compromise position, right? It's the elegant way to balance these community concerns, which are real ones. At the end of the day, like zooming way out, right? The reality is the average American, especially the average Aspenite, has less than 2 kids, like 1.2, right? Which means in the vast majority of cases, what this policy will mean is empty bedrooms, which is none of our goal. So, I can be comfortable with the -1, which we had all kind of agreed to before. But I think realistically, the best policy from a broad community benefit standpoint, including those who are that continuity of family, who I hope to have one day, and I know David and Rick's kids, and I want them to be here too, is we do go to you have to meet the requirements, but we don't ask you to go get, a sham marriage. We allow you to demonstrate a roommate, right? And maybe that's not enforceable over the long time, but it at least it asserts our value in optimizing our housing stock so that a full community is here for that individual and for the rest of us. And then we can take into the parking lot, which I think is super valuable, an opportunity for those individuals to sort of, choose their destiny, right? I can go get roommates. That's my option A. I've already got that in place. If this happens tomorrow, great, I can do that. But maybe I'd actually really prefer to have a studio or a 1-bedroom because I don't want to take care of this 4-bedroom property over time. Maybe that's like not in my goal. Maybe I don't ever want to have a family. And so if we can circle back and look at that in terms of prioritization later and give them the choose your own destiny option, I think for me, that would be the best way to move something concrete forward and then circle back for optimization.
Agreed.
Skippy, can I just ask a clarifying question? Because I got a little confused there, so I want to make sure I bring you back to the right thing. You would like staff to bring back a regulation that is meeting occupancy either through roommate or household, which is dramatically different than how you initially qualify into the program, and that you have to meet occupancy with a household and no roommate.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion, right? I mean, that's how we balance maximizing rooms while instilling, literally what's instilling continuity of community without forced marriage.
Okay. Rachel, I see yours in hand.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I was just gonna raise the question, and I don't know if it's in our appendix in terms of definitions or how we go about this, but you know, when you fill in the census and they ask how many people in your household, it doesn't have to be, their use of the term is not family, or related by blood, or anything. It's just how many people are living under that roof. And I'm wondering if our own use of the term household, we're giving it more import than it technically legally has, and whether we need to clarify that a little more carefully. I have to say I'm not quite where Skip was on all of this. I can go forward with what we have written in here now as the -1, and maintaining the household element until we circle back and create some more detail around how these families, how a 4-bedroom is treated or a 3-bedroom is treated, which is different than the roommate -1. But I just, I can see why everyone's willing to leave it just as it was, because it is very complicated, but it has inequities in it now that, you know, the couple who might inherit a 4-bedroom who are married still wouldn't quite qualify for that unless they got a roommate or had a baby very quickly, you know. So again, I think we need to find more of a workaround that allows people to get into the right size unit for them and get the priority to go into that unit, because they're putting more bedrooms back on the market for a true household to have. So I can't just change to, as long as you have roommates, you can do it at this point. But because these are transfers from immediate families to qualified families. You know, it's just that's how we should be looking at it. And if the qualifications are slightly less stringent for the initial transfer at this point in time, I can see it. But we really should create something that is an incentive for someone to say, I don't really want the 4-bedroom. I'd rather have something more suitable to my size and HOAs and all the other expenses of home ownership.
Rick, I see yours, and then I think Kelly and David, so.
No, forgive me, but I forgot to lower my hand, but I agree with Rachel. I mean, let's keep moving this forward. This is a discussion that we can come back to down the road at some point.
Kelly?
Yeah, you know, I want to try and keep like things like. So, you know, for me in this case, someone who might be poised to inherit a unit is being treated in our rules differently from someone whose parents might be reaching the end of life and actively transferring them that unit. Doesn't totally make sense to me, because now we're like, why aren't they treated more similarly, I guess? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, trying to solve the problem of incentivizing folks to trade down or move down units, you know, program-wide problem. So I don't want to try to solve it in the context of this rule. You know, like, we want to create that program separately and those incentives separately that would apply in this type of situation. So I don't want us to get wrapped up in complicating this rule by trying to invent a way to do that also. So for me, I just would like to keep these simple. I'm fine with sort of the way that it's structured for adding someone onto the deed. I think we need to have a better conversation, taking someone off the deed and having an entirely new owner altogether. Is how I would kind of separate out, you know, what would be easy to move forward now and what we may need to have further dialogue on. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. And just to respond quickly to that, just based upon my experience, and Cindy, I think, would agree with this, and if not, please jump in. A lot of times what we see is we get these phone calls from children that might live not in the community that say, hey, I want to move back when my parent passes away. How do I get the unit? And so our goal is to create that sense of community and keep that sense of community. And so that, I think, is why the regulations have developed how they've developed is the child that's in residence can, or the dependent that's in residence can take over that unit, but if they're not in residence. Now, we have to address that for children that might own something else or might live somewhere else in the valley and want to continue that. And so I think there is two different paths that we need to take, but you know, that's why it's developed how it is to really make sure that that individual is here. So again, I think that's a great idea. We can continue that conversation. There's just that we have to be cognizant of those two different scenarios as we kind of continue talking about it. And David, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think Kelly, and what you just said, Bethany, makes perfect sense. I think it's an issue that needs to be further explored so that everybody's treated fairly in this. There's a lot of goals that we have, and can we get to all of them with one or two solutions? Not today. Let's keep this discussion going.
Okay, I think, Skippy, I understand where we're going from here. So
Can you restate that for all of us and then have us agree or disagree on that, because I am not clear.
Okay, my understanding is that the folks that have commented thus far are okay moving us forward as it's written with occupancy -1. And allowing us to get to a point where we can have the further conversation down the road about right sizing and maybe priority for different situations that might arise. And then the additional conversation of really looking at the regulation that's tied around death of an owner and what happens to the transfer of that unit.
Okay, so just to check in then, moving forward as written, parking lot, those other issues to circle back to later so that we can get consensus, which doesn't mean we all agree that's perfect, but we can all live with it. Is there anyone who can't live with that and wants to make a case for something different right now? All right, there it is.
So if Maddie can jump then to page 36, we're going to jump to our next one. Which is the inclusion of a provision that sellers must sign a listing agreement with APCHA establishing sale procedures and terms, including fees, starting August 1st, 21, an inspection paid for APCHA by an APCHA-approved professional building inspector must be completed prior to APCHA advertising the unit for sale. And I did receive comment from a few folks that we should change the word license to professional building inspector. And so that will go in with a August 1st start date. Kelly, I think you're up first.
Thanks. Yeah, I just thought that maybe it would also make sense to add some text related to what happens to the inspection report, you know, that either APCHA retains, you know, to make it obvious that APCHA's purchasing it, they retain it, they're free to share it, you know, with the owner and the buyer and any future buyers. And if there's any kind of expiration to that, it just, I think, sets the expectation of how that information can be used by the public.
We can do that. And Tom, I think you're next.
Well, inspection, you can have an inspection for a multitude of purposes, and the scope of an inspection can be, you know, it's whatever somebody asks the inspector to do. If this is for the purpose of ensuring compliance with the minimum standards, that may affect the maximum sale price, then we should say this is an inspection for the purpose of determining compliance with the minimum standards. Otherwise, all you're going to do is fight about what the scope of the inspection is and what the purpose of the inspection is.
And Tom, I might let Diane step in right now, but we are not there yet with the board as figuring out that next step. And so I 100% agree that that provision and sentence will have to get added. I just don't think we're there yet. And Diane, please jump in if I've misspoken on that.
No, Bethany, you said that exactly right. And I will add the intention here would be for the board's benefit is that because you haven't finalized what the elements are of that capital improvement program, what we would do is come back and do what Tom says, because we think that's a good idea to specify that. But for now, to just say the home inspection, and we may want to say with these defined capital improvements as we have identified in the seller standards discussion, we may want to put those in the regulations or at least reference them. Thank you.
I don't know if Tom, that answers your question. And Rachel, I see your hand up.
Well, it does sort of, but as written, I'm not sure what the utility of it is, frankly.
You know, I can only agree with Tom on that, in that a home inspection could be for electrical, a home inspection could be for roof, a home inspection could be for livability standards. And right now, it doesn't say what it's inspecting for. It could be inspecting for mold and just mold, you know, kind of thing. And it brings up a really important point, because we have been focusing very much, appropriately so, on the livability standards and how to make sure those are adequately paid for before someone moves in. I do want to keep calling it capital improvements for livability standards, because on the other side of the aisle, we're going to have capital improvements needed for HOA, common elements, or other areas. And we haven't even begun to discuss those costs and how and who pays. So the inspection has to say it's for something. It's not just inspecting to see if your address is correct. You know, it's not an inspection for radon, or is it? You know, people need to know what the inspection is for, and we need to know what we're getting for the inspection for the $500 we pay each time. So there's that. But we really are going to need a larger discussion on the logistics of this, because this is what I'm thinking. Someone comes in with their home, they get it inspected, the inspector says, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And the seller says, okay, let me see what contractor I can get to do that. And then they come back and say, I'm scheduled for the work in 10 weeks from now, after he gets the permits, or after he has an opening, or after his supplies come in. And the logistics of when the work gets done and when the unit gets shown to people or someone gets to buy it, it's very complicated, because the new buyer may have a house to sell of their own, or the new buyer may have a house to close on, and they need to know when they can close on the new one to move into. And this overlap of here's the inspection, here's the work done, and then later on, here's the actual sale and you can move in. And it could be a 4-month wait period. It could be longer, depending on the magnitude of the issues that are found in the types of homes. You know, so we haven't really talked about how the logistics will go forward. And related to that becomes the question of, should that homeowner say, okay, this was inspected, the flooring needs to be replaced, the blinds need to be replaced, this and that and the other thing need to be replaced. The inspector's total says there will be about $12,000, $15,000, who knows what. Is it better for that existing homeowner to do that and spend those $15,000 and pick out the colors and pick out the carpet and pick out the new stove in the bathroom? Or is it better for the potential buyer to be able to say, this is the price, plus you get $15,000 to make these improvements that the inspector chose. And you get to pick the color of the carpet and the blinds and the new type of stove that's going to go in there. And you can go over that $15,000 if your preference is for upgraded interiors, but you have to only spend it on making sure those things happen. But, you know, we're getting into logistics here, but it's a very important logistic of whether it's more important to have the seller make those improvements or to have the seller set aside the cash for the new owner to make those improvements. And I bring this up because I've seen people fix their units up for sale and then see the next person come in and gut it and change it all. And they didn't like the white paint and they didn't like that type of stove. And so we have to, at some point, talk about how this process plays out in real time and in real life and what makes for the best outcome from those things.
Rachel, I think we all completely agree with you, and it's part of the conversation that happened last board meeting, and I think is going to continue to happen with Diane. And I think the addition of this provision was to get us somewhere, because we are going to have to take baby steps. So while, yes, it might not have much teeth for determining maximum sales price, it does allow us to at least start collecting that data and having it, you know, every inspection at least have to occur prior to listing. And so we thought it was a good first step forward.
I'm fully involved in that, and I agree with that. I just think that it should say an inspection for ensuring or to review the livability standards of the given unit. It has to say something of what the inspection's for, even if we don't say what we're going to use it for yet. You know, and
we can definitely add that life safety list that's been in about the past 6 reports. And limit it to life safety at this point. And as you pointed out, the other ones are very important to figure out. This will create, while the hard stop is at the inspection is done, there is not a requirement for them to do something. It will create an increased level of transparency, and we will have more information.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Skippy, I'm going to let you figure out if I can move on or not.
Yeah, I'd like a couple questions for clarification, and then also just Rachel, because I know you were at the last meeting. Everything you just talked about is everyone agrees that all needs to be figured out and is sort of the meat of the how behind standards for sellers. And so, as I understand it, this next section of the meeting that Diane will lead, she's going to be getting all that feedback from us about, like, well, how do we really think about this, and bringing that back at the next meeting where that is going to be the meat of everything. So I'm sure she's got everything you just said down. As to this, Bethany, my questions are, does this apply to RO as well? Does every unit has to have an inspection?
I'm sorry, Skippy, could you repeat that question?
Does this requirement for inspection apply to every APCHA unit, including RO?
It applies to only the APCHA units. The deed restriction states that it is attached to the regulations as they change from time to time. So no, it does not affect every sale right now.
But would it affect every category, including RO, the ones that apply?
It could, yes.
And eventually it will, after the first transfer, it will apply to every single one.
No, because like the North 40 deed restriction always stays the North 40 deed restriction, so that only applies to a certain set of regulations. The Aspen Village deed restriction, for example, I think applies to the 1997 APCHA regulation.
Okay, and we're gonna come up with a really nice piece of cake to encourage them to quit, but they won't necessarily eat the cake, that's up to them. Got it?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so then the follow-up question is, I read, and anyone please correct the record if I'm wrong, that the clear and uniform intention of the board here is to get an inspection before sale for every unit, right? And so hearing Tom say this might not do that is concerning. And so what is the flip side to that, or why should we not make it more specific here? I'm not here to wordsmith it. I'm not the lawyer.
Skippy, are you, I think what Tom was saying was that we should have in this both what is being inspected and what's going to be done with that inspection. And I think what we've worked through is that we can add that list of life safety capital improvements that we have that's in the packet. We can add that, and then for right now, we're going to be silent on what it will be used for. At the point at which the board decides what that capital improvement program looks like, who pays, those other elements, and the process that Rachel described, once that's determined, we will come back and then add that second piece that Tom is talking about. Thank you. Tom, you can please jump in, Tom.
No, that's fine. That's everything I need to know. I'm comfortable with that. We don't need to rehash it. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. If anyone else isn't, obviously jump in and say so, but I think...
Make a comment. I understand leaving out what you're going to use it for. That makes sense at this point. But what we have in our deed restrictions and our guidelines are minimum standards. And it seems logical to me that the inspection would tie into the minimum standards, because if and when we decide we're going to use the minimum standards for something and use the inspections for something, it seemed to me that they're inextricably tied. But, you know, if you want to use the inspection for life, health, safety, you can say that, but it's going to be something very different than the minimum standards.
Tom, just to respond to that, and it's a really good question. What Cindy, Bethany, and I did was we looked at what was in the regulations, and then we said, recognizing that the board doesn't want to make, it's going to be a lot. We're going to be asking a lot of owners as it is. What are the most important things that really affect the ability of someone to live in the house? And window coverings might not matter as much as, is there a window? And so we narrowed that list a little bit, and because the current regulations really don't give APCHA staff that much teeth, what we will likely do then is come back and update that other section about minimum standards, and we may also have that you'll see that Bethany and Cindy have been working on the updated deed restriction, and we may want to then add in some things about carpet or something like that. Thank you.
Any further comment, I guess, from the rest of the board would be my question then on how we want to proceed with this one so that we can move something forward and pass it?
Yeah, sorry, Skippy, just to ask Diane and you and Tom, if it said an inspection paid for by APCHA, by an APCHA approved building inspector for life safety and minimum resale requirements, or whatever that existing term is, why not have both of them in there now? Even if we're not using it for something, but you know, the term, Tom had it more exactly than I did, but the minimum resale, minimum standards and life safety issues, and just put the two in there and let whoever goes in start telling us how bad the carpets are or aren't, and we'll put in the next step of who has to pay what as it's hashed out. But is there a problem with putting both things, that they're looking at, including both titles in this?
I think what we had heard from the board before was the focus on life safety. I mean, there's not a problem with adding that in. I think it was just more than maybe what the board wanted, is what we had heard.
Well, I'd be okay with both. You know, it is two things. It's life safety and, you know, the minimum standards we're looking for. But if we're paying someone to go in, why have them only look at one thing? You know, when there's a different set of standards as well that person has to come up to for their maximum resale price.
David, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can't agree with just signing off on this phrasing as it currently stands. I think it needs to have more meat in it. Maybe more meat is added later and later, but right now, just to get it done doesn't seem like the right thing to do.
David, I think the question on the table is, do we include the life safety list that you can find in the packet, where staff had narrowed down the list of standards to the things that were kind of life safety, versus should we also have in there carpeting, blinds, and other things that are currently listed in the APCHA regulations for kind of livability standards? And that's kind of the question on the table. I think right now there is general agreement that we should add that in as far as what's going to be inspected for. Thanks.
Life safety and livability standards.
It needs to have more in it than there's there currently, as far as I'm concerned.
The livability standards.
That's just my feeling. Yeah, the livability standards, something, but just to say this is okay at the moment and move on, I can't agree with that.
Carson, Rick, you guys want to weigh in here?
My only comment is I don't know how we're getting into blinds and stuff like that. When I moved into my unit here, there were no blinds.
Yeah.
The carpet was very rudimentary, and I don't know why the next person that gets this is going to get the blinds that I put in, but why we're even talking about blinds is beyond me. I mean, that's not that has nothing to do with livability or habitability of the unit. It's a luxury fixture.
Rick, I think what you're talking about is exactly the problem we're trying to solve for, right? Is like you inherited a property when we didn't have the right standards in place. Now we're trying to get them in place.
Yeah, you know, just to answer you, Rick, is because I don't know. I mean, hey, I could be wrong, but I moved into a place that did have blinds, and I'm assuming it has to have working blinds when I leave. But I could be wrong. Maybe it doesn't. You know, I just wasn't sure. I absolutely agree with life safety. I think we all do. There's no issue about that. I just don't want someone to have an inspection and say, okay, I'm fixing the life safety things that came up, and then they have a second hurdle over the livability standards where Cindy or whoever looking at the unit says, but this carpet's 20 years old, this has to be replaced before you can sell the unit. And it's not life safety, but it is related to the original condition that that person bought that brand new unit and lived in it for 20 years and wore the carpet out. And so I don't want there to be a second hit that someone is told, okay, fix all the life safety. Okay, did that, now fix this, because this is a different standard that we also employ. Because we're going to employ both standards, aren't we, or are we not?
Diane, I'm just going to jump in quickly and maybe, I think the great discussion that we're all having is why we wanted to get at least an inspection in. And yes, the inspection doesn't have the teeth that we might want right now, but it allows the board to continue all these robust conversations to figure out what that wording might need to be and what the livability standards might be versus the life and safety, and it allows us time, but it allows staff to start gathering that inspection data as of August 1st for all sales, not all sales, but all sales that relate to the current deed restriction. And it allows us to start gathering that data and continue this discussion with whether it's led by Diane or someone else as we keep moving forward.
Bethany, to clarify, what I'm hearing is that in this current construction, that inspection may not include every element of the property, that it may be limited to only certain things, where the intention of the board was to have a comprehensive, complete inspection. So am I misunderstanding that?
Yes,
it will be a comprehensive, complete inspection paid for by paid by APCHA. So it will be an inspection of everything. It's not that the inspector is only looking at certain things. They will only look at that unit. So if it's a condo, for example, and the HOA is responsible for the roof, the inspector is not going to look at the roof because it's the HOA's responsibility, but the inspector will be looking at that unit. If it's a single family home, the inspector would have to look at that roof and siding and all other features associated with it.
So this does get us to where we had said, which is we want a complete inspection of all these properties before listing. We'll have that information, and then we can further specify what that will be used for once we actually know what it will be used for when we circle around to the standards for sellers discussion.
Skippy, I think I can help move this along. I have up right now page 88 of your current packet, and I've got page 34 of the APCHA regulations. And what if I can share my screen, because I think where we got to was that I think I heard a general agreement, at least of the people who were talking, that we can specify at a minimum the things that are on page 88. So any items that are not responsibility of the HOA, but windows that need to be replaced, roof problems, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, leaks, foundations that need repairs, molds, failing a radon test, structural issues, safety issues needed. So that's on page 88. And can you blow that up a little bit? Now, if I go over to the, thanks. So there's that list. And if, in the regulations now that Rachel's talking about, it also says clean, odor-free interior. Carpets professionally steam cleaned within 2 weeks. Surface scratches, marks, holes, other than normal wear and tear, walls in good repair and paint ready. It's got other things that we had heard from the board in prior discussions that you had wanted to focus on life safety. Now, that being said, we can add these other tile, grout in good repair and clean. We can add those in to the required inspection items, and I do agree it's a good idea to specify what's going to be inspected. And so I think the question on the table for the board now, I think I'm going to make an assumption, and please correct me on this, that at a minimum, you do want the things inspected which are showing on the screen right now. And I am seeing a different list than what's up on your screen. 602. Oh, great. Okay. Can you scroll down to which of these aforementioned elements qualify as capital improvements? Yep, great. So at a minimum, we want that list. And the question is, do we also want the current page 34 of the APCHA regulations? Do we want to add those into the inspection? Thanks. Francie, please.
Yeah, that's a really helpful list. I'm looking right now at a home inspection sort of checklist from a friend of mine who's a home inspector. And it's very similar to what you have there, which is, no surprise, Diane, I'm sure you've done more than your homework. But definitely a regular inspection, covers the whole exterior, including whether houses are impinged on by trees, grade and drainage, walkway and porch, driveway, garage. It has a very similar list to what you have, Diane, roof structure, whether there's any things missing, roof drainage, foundation, basement slab, basement, floor structure, plumbing, water meter, gas meter, water heater, electric service. I mean, it goes on, and it's not dissimilar from what Diane has put together. Carbon monoxide alarms, smoke alarms, windows, doors. I mean, a typical home inspection is very complete. So if we hire somebody who's going to do a typical home inspection, they're going to give us a report, and then we're going to look at that report and decide which parts of this report do we need to act on and which don't we. But for the most part, the home inspection is going to either say, everything looks great, go ahead and sell the property or as is, or look at all these things. Look at walls and ceilings, look at carpet, look at the first level, look at kitchen cabinets, appliances. They're going to check everything, especially for a $500 inspection. So I think once we have that inspection and we have this very comprehensive list that Diane and other staff have put together, we're going to have a pretty clear idea of whether or not we have a home that needs a lot of improvement before sale without specifying anything more than what's already specified. I mean, a qualified home inspector is going to be an incredible tool for us, and so I don't think we need to be fretting too much about listing specific items that we need to be addressing. I mean, I think we can leave that in the hands of the professional home inspectors.
Sorry, I believe, David, is that an old hand or a new one? And then Rachel?
An old hand, excuse me.
Okay, thanks. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I agree very much with what Francie is saying. I think that what we're talking about is just the terminology in that one sentence so we can move forward. And I think that, in my mind, this is not just for us to read and APCHA staff to read, it's for a buyer to read, and it's for the public to read. So I'm looking at it that every buyer is going to be a seller one day, and they want to know what they're responsible for. So by saying the inspection is going to be for life safety and livability standards, it includes both. So that when we get that report back and we say you have to replace the carpet or you have to put in a deduction from your maximum to replace the carpet, they're understanding that it's not just, you know, pure life safety, it's also the livability standards that you just mentioned about walls are caulked and paint ready or whatever it is. I just don't think we're getting in trouble by using both of those terms and the list as you're putting forward, Diane. I think that makes a lot of sense. The one thing I do want to talk about is our language usage, because it's just too easy to be misconstrued. Some capital improvements can be added to your maximum resale value. Why don't we call these capital repairs? These are capital repairs that people are going to be making to an original structure. A capital improvement is when you improve beyond the original standard, like you add solar panels to the roof. But right now, basic repairs cannot be added to your maximum resale price. And so I'm just getting, I think we really have to start thinking about what do we call these? And these are capital repairs that people are having to do to the home, so that there's no confusion that they can't add them to their maximum resale price after they've made them. Thank you.
So Skippy, is it okay to pull the board on the two things that Rachel's proposed? Is one is that we take the list that's on page 88 plus the list that's on page 34 of the, sorry, my dogs are telling me it's dinner, and I'm trying to text my husband to tell him to feed them. And we'll also take the list that's on page 34 or 35 of the APCHA regulations and merge those two lists and include them. The second proposal that I heard from Rachel was to to call these capital repairs and not capital improvements? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Kelly?
We can take those one at a time, Diane.
I think they both sound good to me.
Great. Francie?
Yes.
Great. Rick? Sorry.
Yes, I'm good. I'm good with that as well.
Great. Person?
Same for me.
Great. Skippy?
Yeah, good on the first one, good on the second one, barring any objection from legal, who knows more about this than I do, but it sounds right from Rachel.
Awesome. Rachel, is that new hand, old hand?
No, old hand.
Old hand, great. Bethany, are you good for me to hand it back to you? And Bethany, thanks for letting me jump in and take this section for a little bit.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Let's move forward if that's okay.
Bethany, can I just, one small thing?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have a hand. Just, I realized in the recap, in the last section, I think it's because at the beginning, it didn't get recapped, but I just wanted to make sure you had that note of adding the word at, so at or below category 5, not just below.
My notes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, sorry, I have kids in the background too, so Diane's got dogs, I've got kids right now. So the next one that we are adding or propose to add in is an addition to the owner rental policy. So we, as we talked about last time, we get a lot of requests from owners that would like to move in a significant other that does not qualify due to the significant other not working in Pitkin County. The idea of this provision is to allow that significant other to move in, to APCHA, to know about it, and to understand that significant other can't be on the deed. This is basically a rental roommate, but that they can be in the unit even though they don't work in Pitkin County. Any questions?
Yeah, I got a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Rachel. Okay, I'm down to a small screen, so I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I understand that. I know I was gone for 2 weeks, guys, but when I read this one, I went, what the heck? This is the most difficult thing to even consider enforcing. I was single once, and I had a significant other every year or so, you know? And to just say that APCHA units now, you have to qualify, and you have to say you're a significant other, but how do you know it's not just a rental situation? How do you know how much they're contributing to income each month, each year? I mean, honestly, part of me getting married this year was because my significant other was moving in, and we were told you could not have someone who did not work in Pitkin County unless you were married. And that the significant other relationship is so minimal for me to think that, you know, it would be an enforcement nightmare for Bethany. How significant are you? Oh, we met 3 weeks ago and he's moving in, and oh no, he doesn't really work here, but he's my significant other. You know, that's the loosest, goosiest standard I've ever seen in my life. And I just don't know either how it's enforceable or why it would be allowed, you know.
So Rachel, I think what we're attempting, and I don't mean to cut you off, but what we get right now is tons of phone calls from folks saying, hey, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, you know, they're paying rent and living with me, or they're paying household expenses, but they don't work in Pitkin County. And so APCHA's perspective is more the idea of trying to figure out how we catalog and confirm and figure out who's in the unit while understanding that they might not all move in. So it might not be perfect, and you're right, it might be a nuisance, but right now what we're faced with is trying to figure out, are they paying rent or not? Are they contributing to household expenses, and what is that amount? And at least under this situation, we can at least dictate the amount that can be charged based upon the regulations and the owner's expenses. And so it might not be perfect, but that was the rationale for it.
Okay, to me, this simply says we are now allowing units, bedrooms to be rented to non-workers of Pitkin County, period. For whatever reason, they want it to be that way, whether it's someone who comes in every 2 weeks. And, you know, when someone signs their nice form and sends it in and says, this is what I'm charging for rent, do you ever verify that? No, we can't. And this is just setting up a situation where people who do not work in Pitkin County can get a nice Aspen apartment and agree to not tell anyone that they're paying $2,000 a month instead of $1,000, but it's still a lot cheaper than the on the free market. This is the largest loophole I've ever seen and would drive a pickup truck right through it. So I understand the hassle that staff is getting, but staff needs to tell these people, well, I'm sorry, he cannot be your roommate, or she cannot be your roommate, or they cannot be your roommate. They have to get a free market place if they would like to not work in Pitkin County while living here. It's the biggest loophole I've ever seen proposed, and it might deal with some massive phone calls you're getting now, but believe you me, it's going to lead to an awful lot of units with non-workers in extra bedrooms who we do not get to verify until later when someone says, oh man, they overcharged me. Do you think you could help me take them to court? You know, for the past 2 years that I was paying too much? And then they depend on APCHA to do something like that, which I've seen before. But, you know, we're not going to be able to verify how significant the relationship stays or whether what the rent that person is actually paying. That person may be told this is what you have to pay or what you shouldn't pay more than this, but they've already made an arrangement. I just don't understand it at all. So it's something I would not be able to support.
And staff's fine removing it as well. Skippy, if you'd like to figure out where the rest of the board lies, then we can move one direction or the other for next week.
I tend to agree with Rachel on this one. Unless you have an ability to see people's financial statements and their bank accounts, how could you ever know what's actually going on? I've turned over some things to be investigated, wherein a free market owner is living with someone that has a 4-bedroom unit. They're just good friends. That owner says they're just friends. They're not paying any rent. It's BS. And there's no way for Bethany to know whether that owner's telling her the truth or not. This is a nightmare.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got my hand up.
Sorry, Francie. Okay, go ahead.
I am confused about what people are objecting to here, because my objection would be invasion of privacy, not whether they're collecting rent from somebody who's not working in Pitkin County. I mean, if somebody says they have a significant other living there, well, we're going to investigate whether or not they sleep in the same bed, or, I mean, it's just really, I don't see it as a problem with people trying to live in a unit and pay rent. I see it as a problem of, really, we're going to be investigating people's love lives and their bank accounts, and I think my concern is different than Rachel's, but I certainly have a lot of concern about it.
And that's fair. And I see David and then Tom. So David.
Yes, we need to find a better solution to this than what we're looking at. I have to agree with Rachel and also with Francie. There's a point where we can't go, we just can't go so far into somebody's truth-telling or not truth-telling. But on the other hand, we also can't have just fill out the packet here and run with it. There's got to be something in the middle.
Fair, Tom?
Well, yeah, when I first looked at this, I made the comment to staff that we should try to define the term, but, and I've looked at the definition, and as far as it goes, yeah, it's a definition, but this is, I think, in the end, an enforcement it's not just an enforcement nightmare, it's an enforcement impossibility. Someone can be your significant other today and not tomorrow. There's no way to measure this. You have to take somebody at face value when they tell you this. There's nothing else you can do. Why not just tell these people, look, if this person qualifies as a roommate, fine. But you don't get any special consideration just because you're in love this week. I mean, it's too easy to manipulate this, let's face it.
I think staff was trying to, it's manipulated right now, and so staff was trying to find a solution to move us forward because we field a ton of phone calls from folks that their girlfriend, boyfriend wants to move in and they'd like to have them pay some utilities and possibly some rent, but that person lives in or works in Garfield County. And so it was a way that staff felt we could meet in the middle with them, but we will remove it from for second reading based upon tonight's feedback. So it will not be present for next week.
Can I jump in and play a little devil's advocate?
Yes, please.
I guess I'm just wondering, do we have a maximum occupancy?
No.
No. An HOA can set a maximum occupancy, but APCHA cannot set a maximum occupancy.
So, like, you know, people who likely there are some who genuinely are in love, and I'll say this too. You know, so the problem here is maybe that person wants to contribute to household expenses, but the APCHA qualified tenant can't accept it. And so they figure out some other way to remunerate them, right? And just sort of shuffle money around if that is what the prohibition is here. You know, I'm wondering if there's just some other language about, you know, that person cannot count towards your occupancy requirement, your minimum occupancy requirement, then, you know, you're not housing people who don't qualify to house. You know, that is sort of a boundary that could be set here. That also would let that person like authentically accept housing, you know, housing expenses in an honest way.
But we're not talking about somebody who is identified as part of the household when they apply for the unit, are we?
Mm-mm.
We're just talking about after ownership is acquired, you bring in someone else, right? Or you want to.
And we're not talking about adding them to the deed. We are saying they can be a renter.
No,
so it's not the allowance to be on the deed.
Right. No, I'm not talking about that either. When you apply and you say, here is my household, that's not this situation, right?
Correct.
We're talking about somebody who already is an owner on the deed and they want to bring in another person.
Yeah, but that person is applying as a renter.
No, they're not. That's what this is. They're not applying as a renter. Right?
No, Tom, this is applying as a renter. It's not applying as an owner. It is just applying.
Yeah, but it doesn't say you have to be applying. Well, then it's even more confusing because it doesn't, if they're a renter, if they're supposed to be a renter, why wouldn't they need to meet the requirements for a renter? And if you if you don't want them to meet the requirements of a renter, it doesn't say that here.
So this is under the owner rental policies in the APCHA regulations, and this is the last bullet point of that section, which outlines
whether or not they have to meet the other requirements is what I'm saying.
Oh, so it says they must still complete a qualification packet and they cannot own other property in the OEZ.
So it should say they don't have to meet any other requirement. It's because it only refers to the employment requirement and the owning other property requirement. And so even as written, it's not very it's not entirely clear. But like I say, I don't know, I just think this would be a bad thing. Somebody's a significant other for the purpose of getting into the unit, and I don't.
Tom, if you could keep your advice to giving us the facts here instead of.
Well, I am. I don't know how you maintain the integrity of the rental portion of this ownership program with this in there.
I know staff is leading this conversation, but I see a bunch of hands up. I've heard a lot of issues with this, which I think are fair. So I just ask, in the interest of getting to standards for sellers, to set us up for success for next week with the meat of what we want to do. Just try and keep your comments short. If you're against it, say so. If you're for it, I mean, I don't want to leave anything off the table, but let's just be mindful of time is my request.
Thanks, Skippy.
Bethany, I'll call on folks who have hands up. David, now David's hands down. Rachel?
Yeah, I'll just go back to what I said. I think this is an enforcement nightmare. It creates a new privilege for owners that any renter in the APCHA program would never get. They'd never be able to sublet a room kind of to someone who's significant to pay rent who doesn't work in Pitkin County. It really changes the program. And, you know, hey, it makes single women up in Aspen really attractive for people who work in Garfield County. So there might be some advantages there. But, you know, it starts to become a question of, well, why don't you live down with your boyfriend in Garfield County rather than up here? I mean, you're doing something weird. And beyond that, I know people in polyamorous relationships who would have more than one significant other. And I don't think we want to get in the business, as Francine said, about making moral judgments or asking people the details of their relationships. I'm just saying, I think it's a loophole that you can drive a truck through. And if we're going to start saying that part of the APCHA program is being used after a $300,000, $400,000 subsidy per unit or $100,000 per bedroom by people who do not work in Pitkin County, and we're blessing that, I think that's a mistake.
I think at this point we're super clear about the pieces of this that need to be brought back of the code that we have that can be brought back for second or first reading. I do want to point out though that the board was in a completely different place last week. So please don't, you know, I think we're clear about where the board is, and we can move on. Either Skippy, do you want to go to board comments at quarter of? You know, we need to start executive session at 6.
I would like, first and foremost, Diane, I appreciate that you're clear, but I would just like to restate what you've heard so the board can agree and we can all be clear together. And then we initially were going to move to executive session at 6. We're moving those discussions up, the board of directors. So that's 6:15 and we're still on schedule. And I do want to make sure we're set up for standards for sellers. So if you could just kind of parrot back to us what you've heard for a collective head nod. It's cool that the board has moved. That is normal, but I want to make sure we're still aligned. And then we'll have 15 minutes for requests for more information, all those sort of things, so you guys can be ready for the next meeting. And then we'll go to the board members' comments.
Sorry, I think I was off on the agenda.
No, you were right. You're reading it. It's just because we've moved it. We have an extra 15 minutes to top.
Oh, I get it. So we're going to start executive session at 6:15. You're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we will have folks show up for executive session at 6. But if board comments don't take 15 minutes, then we can do that. Right. So Bethany, do you wanna give the summary?
Yes, I'm happy to.
What I heard was completely scrap the last piece and then bring back all the other ones.
Yeah, I've gotten track of all the other ones, and I think we've summarized those. We're going to scrap the last one, and then am I skipping leave of absence additions and maximum sales price for compliance for next board meeting, or?
No, I think you can go ahead and do that one, Bethany.
Okay. Great, so we're scrapping and we're moving on. So the leave of absence additions, it's page 47 of the APCHA regulations. An owner is allowed to be on a leave of absence for at most 24 months during a 10-year period. So right now, a homeowner is allowed to be on a leave of absence based upon the language for 24 months over the course of their ownership, and we have adjusted it to provide a little bit more flexibility based upon kind of discussions in-house. But please provide some feedback. And I don't see any hands yet.
We'll take that as we agree.
Okay. Moving on, the page 54 of the APCHA regulations, maximum sales price with a compliance forced sale. This provision is needed for compliance forced sales in units that do not have to sell through APCHA and that still relate to these regulations. So the maximum sales price will be lowered by 10% in compliance cases every 6 months if a unit does not sell. So right now that is indeed restriction for units that are sold through APCHA, that the sales price would be reduced every 6 months. I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback. And I see no hands either.
Great.
Okay, wow, that went quick. So on that, I will bring these back with all of the changes for second reading at the June 16th meeting.
Beautiful.
We need a, because this is first reading, I need a motion. I need a motion to move it to public hearing.
Do you need a motion to read first and then a motion to approve on first reading?
I need a motion to approve on first reading and move to public hearing on June 16th. And on page 11 of the big 11, that states what the recommendation is that I need.
Okay, I'm an alternate, so I can't make the motion, but whoever does, please say as amended in this discussion.
Looking for a motion.
All right, I'm toggling. I will move to approve on first reading as amended by our discussions today, a resolution of the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority Board adopting amendments to the Aspen-Pitkin County Employee Housing Regulations and to set for second reading and public hearing on June 16th. Resolution number 4, series of 2021.
Excellently toggled.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a first from Kelly and a second from Rick. Staff, would you please read the roll?
Skippy.
Yes.
Carson.
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you guys so much. It's a lot. And I just want to make one small request. You know, obviously we have second reading for a reason, but I know we all want to move this forward and get into the meat of the standards for sellers. So if you have anything lingering from this conversation that's just confusing and you need more information, please follow up with staff via email directly so that when we get to the next meeting, hopefully we can have an expeditious approval and get into the meat of the next subject. With that, Diane, I will turn this back to you. Just to be very clear with everyone, we're in a limited time frame. This is not when we are anticipating diving in and discussing all of the complex logistics of bringing the standards to sellers forward. Diane's going to lead us through a quick and expeditious confirmation of the things that we've already agreed to, some initial requests on budget that we'd like to agree to generally. We can get back to the specifics around FTEs and logistics later, but we want to know we're aligned and moving forward. And then any specific needs or questions or sort of hard red lines that are important for the group to know ahead of time. Staff is going to take this and bring us back an initial proposal for a program, which is when we can dig into all of those details next, I keep saying week, next meeting 2 weeks from now. Diane.
Mr. Chair, I do want to ask if it may be possible to do director's comments now because we do have a number of people showing up at 6 o'clock who are going to participate in executive session, and I do believe we need an hour in executive session. And I think we can rock at the next meeting on all this.
Okay, I'm comfortable with doing that. Director's comments are obviously optional. If we have extra time, do you want to go into executive now or not?
No, what I'm saying is do director's comments now, and then at 6 o'clock, go right into executive session at 6 o'clock, not at 6:15, because we do have a lot of guests showing up.
Sure. Great. So, all right. So we'll close temporary this part of the hearing. Turn to director's comments if anybody has any. And if we don't, we will have a few minutes to continue this discussion. And if we somehow end early, then we can have time at the end as well. I want to make sure we're set up.
No, we can't come back after exec session, because the reason why we moved exec session to the end is so that GrassRoots can leave and we no longer have to record.
Okay. All right. Well, so just opening it up, please raise your hand if anyone has any comments that they'd like to make for the board or the public. Rick.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Diane and staff on changing those references to a licensed home inspector. Colorado does not have a licensing program. They are in the process of investigating that as a potential. Right now, there are only 8 to 10 home inspectors in the entire county of Pitkin. Only 3 of those are nationally certified. That's my only comment. I want to thank them for at least losing those references to a licensed home inspector.
Thanks, Rick.
And I do want to seriously thank Rick for the call yesterday, because it allowed us to have a little bit more in-depth conversation about it, gave me a good understanding, and gave us the ability to bring that forward and kind of not have to spend a lot of time on that. So thanks for the heads up, Rick. That's helpful.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. And I am not requiring an answer at this time, but was wondering, Diane and Skippy, if we've been discussing or talking about when we might go back to in-person meetings.
We did. Yeah, the July 1 is the target, and the reason we are taking longer is a fewfold. Primarily, staff is in the process of moving offices, and so logistically that was difficult. And they felt that as long as that was going to be a difficulty, it would give us the benefit of learning from the other boards and commissions that go back this month, best practices, and be ready to go in July.
Yeah, I can appreciate that and accept that. I just think that some of these conversations we're having on really tricky subject matter will go better when we're all in person and we can use some butcher block on the wall and all be talking the same language at the same time. Thank you.
And have a great meal to boot, thanks to Cindy.
Who cooks at a different restaurant every time we're there. It's so weird. Yeah.
I'll also say that Cindy, Bethany, Skippy, and I had the opportunity to meet this week with Kelly, Melissa, and Phyllis from the county to go through and talk about kind of how things work, some of the logistics, and what are some of the learnings and some of the recommendations they had. So that was super helpful. And many of you I've never met in person, so I'm looking forward to that. Thanks.
Anybody else? I'll make one just real brief comment, and I just want to also say, I don't know if it's in the BOCC room, but I would love a whiteboard. Rachel said butcher paper, which is fine, but I really think having something visual would be a huge benefit to these conversations. So however we manifest that, that is a request of me. You know, the only thing I want to say, and you guys have already, we've added an hour to the meeting, right? So everyone recognizes that we need more time. I'm not making any specific requests at this time, but this conversation and the others, you know, to me, to meet the community's needs of all this long tail of work we need to do, you know, even with this extra hour, I just don't see us getting there. So I just want to put it on everyone's radar to start thinking about that. And I know that comes with a lot of downstream consequences. So I'm just bringing it up so we can individually think about how we do that, because we have a lot of work that we want to do. Our time is limited, but the outcome for the community, yeah, I'm not sure how those are matching up, just in observation over the last few months. And there's no fault of anyone here. It's just that's the reality of having a lot to do. So I just want to put that on radars to think about. And Diane, I guess that is the totality of our director's comments. So if we want to use the 7 minutes to reset for executive session, that's great. But I would ask you, we had initially wanted to get some feedback to make sure we are really set up for the meat of our standard for sellers discussion upcoming. Do you have any request of us now or in the interim that would help you be set up in the best way possible in 2 weeks?
I can give you one piece, and thanks for that, Skippy. One of the things that Skippy and Cindy and Bethany and I talked about this week is because this capital improvements, capital repairs, and Rachel, I'm in the process of updating the next report with that. I think that's a really good catch. Because this is such a complex and multifaceted issue, the way that I'm processing this is to go stepwise. So if you look at that, the home inspection is a good piece, right? As Rachel correctly pointed out today, we don't have all the mechanics worked out of downstream. Once we get the inspection done and once we figured out who pays, we haven't defined the whole processes and how it's going to work and who inspects and who does the repairs and what the time frames are. Instead, what we're trying to do is take logical pieces of this and get agreement on them. So one of the things that you'll notice is that I am starting each policy memo to the board with, here's what was decided at this meeting. And we all have lives and we all miss meetings. So that's the other piece that I want to make sure that folks know what happened. And always, please know, don't ever hesitate to call Cindy, Bethany, or me if you did miss a meeting and say, hey, I just read this in the report. I'm not sure what that means. Can I get some background on this? So for example, at the last board meeting, there was discussion of, Carson brought up the idea of the optional inspections for people who aren't looking to sell their homes but want to make repairs or improvements. That had been in an early part of the discussion in early memos. I had taken that out simply for simplicity and now have brought it back, and you'll see it's in the current memo. The second piece, Francie had brought up the idea of, hey, it makes sense to have a more periodic inspections if we really want to stay on top of this. The board had a good discussion, decided at this point, don't want to do that. The third piece was, while there wasn't consensus on exactly how much, there was consensus that their sellers should have some amount of responsibility in that transaction process. There's a whole lot more discussion to happen about exactly how much. And then the other piece was, there was consensus, again, and consensus, not unanimity. There was consensus around sellers who bought their property recently shouldn't be saddled with legacy issues, and whatever we come up with should honor and recognize that. So again, moving stepwise through the process, I will be looking to stand on the shoulders of those pieces of consensus. I don't know who is first. I'll take them in the order I see them on the screen. Rachel, then Kelly.
Yeah, really briefly, Diane, I had mentioned a couple of times that I think we should consider requiring an inspection before someone refinances, because you can refinance and take 95% of your equity out, and then if you go to sell and we want to get something back from the seller, they may have already used all that equity. And so I know it's a larger discussion for topic for discussion, but I have wondered whether we should require an inspection before refinancing is signed off on. Thank you. We just don't want anybody underwater on their value later. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. I did add that to, I think we can add that to as a question for the next report and kind of address that pretty quickly. And staff has experience with people being upside down because they've refinanced and the bank has given them more than the property's worth. Thanks. Kelly?
Thank you. I want to go back to a different topic. I just want to request, if it is possible, since we will be having a public hearing on regulations, if we could send out an email to our APCHA email list of folks to advise them of that, as well as their opportunity to provide public comment. I think we are still struggling to have public engagement on some of these important topics. And, that may be just another way to cue people up that they can weigh in on these decisions that will likely affect many of them. Thanks.
And just so I'm clear, Kelly, you're suggesting we email the entire owners list, not, owners and renters, not just our newsletter list?
I think so.
Okay. Bethany, you got that one?
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, do we need a few minutes to shift over here, or how will this work?
We need a motion first to go into exec session.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Please do.
Move into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024B. Conference with authority's attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions. And E, determining position relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations. Developing strategy for negotiations and instructing negotiators. Specific items discussions involve the Centennial Owners Association versus APCHA et al. Case number 2015-CV030158-2.
I will second, and I'd also like to ask permission to invite County Assistant Manager Phyllis Mattias and Attorney Laura Maker, if the board will allow that.
Good by me.
Yeah.
Tom?
Do we stay here, or do we have to go out and come in again somewhere?
No, just stay right there.
Well, but we have to stop for about 5 minutes, but you can stay right there. But let me get a roll call vote really quick.
Okay.
1 second, Cindy. I can't vote on the motion, but I'd like to request that we have Jim True as the city attorney and Sarah Ott as the city manager being invited into this, as well as the two county people. Everybody?
I have one other comment. This will need to be recorded on a separate tape because it's not only for the purpose of legal advice.
Thanks, Tom.
So Madeline and whoever's gonna, Maddie, you and
It'll be
Cindy
me.
need to figure out how we
We'll
can
figure
record
it out.
this. If
I'll
possible.
figure it out. That's fine.
So we have first a motion and a second on the table, including the invites from both the county and the city. Staff, can you please read the roll?
I can read the roll, Bethany. Skippy,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
So give us till about 5 after. So give us, or is 3 minutes enough?
Give us like 5 minutes. I will let you know when we are set to go, okay?
Okay, let's
We
just
all
come back.
stay here and you get rid of everyone else. Is that correct?
You stay here. Board members and county people stay.